You ever walk into your own house and feel like you've just broken into someone else's? That's exactly what happened to me, and what came next still doesn't feel real. I'd been out of town for a few weeks on a work trip. I left everything locked up, bills paid, thermostat set, normal stuff. But the second I opened the front door, I knew something was off. Shoes I didn't recognize at the door, a purse on my kitchen counter. And then I heard humming from the hallway bathroom. At first, I thought maybe a friend had come to check on the place. But no, standing there in her robe, like she owned the place, was Karen, the HOA board member who always had something to say about my lawn or my recycling bin. And without missing a beat, she shrieked like I was the intruder and ran to call 911. I couldn't believe it. I'm literally standing in my own home while she's reporting me to the police for breaking and entering. And to make it worse, she starts yelling loud enough for the neighbors to hear, throwing out words like trespassing and dangerous. Meanwhile, I'm trying to stay calm, looking around at my furniture rearranged, mail opened, even some of my clothes missing. She had clearly been living there, squatting, and the worst part, she actually believed she had a right to be there. The cops showed up minutes later, and what unfolded on my front lawn turned into something straight out of a movie. It wasn't just about a squatter anymore. It was a full-blown power trip. And it turns out, Karen had been planning this for a while. You won't believe what they found in my guest room, and what she tried to tell the officers next. So while two officers are questioning me in my driveway, asking if I have proof I actually live here, Karen is calmly sipping coffee on my porch, acting like the victim. I keep telling them this is my house, that I have the deed, mail, even smart home logs showing when the doors were last opened. But Karen? She pulls out some paper and starts waving it around, saying I abandoned the property and that the HOA had temporarily reassigned it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Here's some backstory to make this crazier. Karen's been on the HOA board for years, and she's always had this weird obsession with control. Another time, she knocked on my door because my trash bins were out 30 minutes too early. But I always just kept my head down, paid what I had to, and moved on. I never imagined she'd take it this far. Turns out, while I was away, she told neighbors I'd moved out permanently and said she was stepping in to protect the property. According to her, she'd seen signs of neglect. Meanwhile, I had auto sprinklers going, lights on timers, everything secure. She basically used her position to make it look legit. When the officers asked to go inside, I walked them through the mess. My guest room had been turned into a craft station, HOA flyers, clipboards, even a bulletin board full of community gossip. My fridge had her food in it, and she even changed my Wi-Fi name to HOA Base. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or lose it, but here's the part that chilled me. When one of the officers glanced at her bulletin board, he stopped. Then asked Karen where she got a certain file. She froze. He called for backup. That's when I knew. This wasn't just squatting. Something way deeper was going on as the second squad car pulled up. Karen started shifting nervously in her seat, but still tried to keep that smug, in-control look. The officer who spotted the file didn't say much, just whispered something to his partner and kept his eye on her. I stood there, still in shock, watching my home turn into a scene out of a crime drama. I didn't even know what to ask at that point. I was too focused on the fact that my personal space had been violated, and possibly for way more than just a power trip. One of the officers asked me to step aside while they talked to Karen privately. From the corner of my eye, I saw her voice shift from aggressive to panicked. She started talking fast, throwing her hands around, pointing at me like I was the problem. But something was off. That confident HOA attitude. It was cracking. Meanwhile, I finally had a chance to really look through the things she'd brought into my house. There were documents, some marked confidential, others with addresses that weren't even in our neighborhood. names I didn't recognize, photos of other residents' houses, and notes scribbled next to them, stuff like late-on dues, unauthorized renovations, and even watch closely. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about my house. Karen had been quietly tracking people across the entire HOA, like she was running some weird neighborhood surveillance operation. And judging by the looks on the officers' faces, I wasn't the first person she'd tried to take control over. Then I remembered something. A neighbor down the street, Mark, had suddenly moved out last month. No warning, no yard sale, just gone overnight. At the time, it seemed odd, but I didn't think much of it. Now I was starting to wonder if Karen had pulled the same stunt on him. And if she had, what happened when he pushed back? Just as I was about to ask the officers more, one of them radioed in and stepped outside. The backup wasn't just there for support. It was because Karen wasn't just a squatter. She was now the center of a growing investigation. The moment the officers stepped out to take that call, everything shifted. Karen, who had been pacing and whispering nervously to herself, suddenly made a break for the hallway. She grabbed a tote. Bagwan, I hadn't seen before, tried to rush past the kitchen. The officers immediately shouted for her to stop, but she bolted toward the garage. I didn't even realize until then that she had parked her car in my garage like she'd lived here for years, before she could hit the button to open the door. One of the officers tackled her down, and the tote spilled across the floor. Papers, keys, even a burner phone slid across the tile. The other officer pulled me aside, trying to keep me calm. But I could tell from his face that this had turned into something way beyond just trespassing as they cuffed her. She screamed about being set up and said I was part of the plot to silence her. The officers looked at each other, clearly trying to piece it all together. One of them started carefully collecting the spilled items, while the other kept questioning Karen, who was now crying, yelling, and refusing to answer anything clearly. They sat her down and started going through the phone from her bag. I watched over their shoulders. The screen lit up with messages, folders labeled with residents' names, and something called Operation Transition. I felt a chill run down my spine. One folder even had a picture of my passport. How had she gotten that? Then, one of the officers got a call on his radio. He stepped away, listened, then came back with a look that made my stomach sink. He told his partner, "It's confirmed. She's been to 3 other houses. We've got 2 families missing. One filed a report last year. And they think Shamites have been targeting the entire HOA board." I stood there, stunned, realizing this wasn't just my nightmare at Mitsev, been going on for years, and whatever she had planned next, we weren't ready for it. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, the officer who'd gone outside returned with a small, locked metal box in his hands. "We found this hidden behind the wall. In the guest room closet," he said quietly, glancing toward Karen, who had suddenly gone completely silent. The way she stared at that box, it wasn't just fear, it was panic. They set it down on my kitchen island, right where I usually eat breakfast, and carefully pried it open. Inside were dozens of flash drives, old photos, and handwritten logs. One of the officers pulled out a list. Every name on it belonged to someone in the neighborhood, including mine. Next to each name were strange notes, like pressure point, daughter, divorce filed, medical debt, and other personal details nobody should have had access to. It wasn't just about power, it was about control. And that's when the second twist hit. One of the flash drives had a label on it, Board Audio. 2021. The officer plugged it into his laptop and played a few seconds through a headset. His face went stiff. He passed the headset to his partner, who immediately hit pause and looked straight at me. "This isn't just Karen," he said. "She wasn't working alone." I felt the floor drop beneath me. If Karen wasn't acting alone, who was backing her? Or worse, who else inside the HOA was helping her pull this off? I started thinking back how the HOA president always seemed to shrug things off when people complained. How a few other board members had suddenly stepped down without explanation. The officer made a call right there and asked for a detective to come in. Meanwhile, Karen had gone stone cold quiet, staring at the wall like she knew it was over but still refusing to talk. My house wasn't just a crime scene anymore. It was the center of a twisted network that had gone unnoticed for far too long. And the scariest part, the real person pulling the strings hadn't shown their face yet. About an hour later, a plainclothes detective arrived with a small team. They quietly took over the scene, separating me from the officers and beginning to scan through the files and devices laid out on my kitchen table. Karen had been completely silent since the box was opened. Her whole energy shifted. Gone was the loud, smug HOA enforcer. Now she looked like someone waiting for the storm to hit. The detective sat me down and explained what they'd uncovered so far. Karen had been digging into residents' private records, financials, legal issues, even health info. But what shocked me most was how she got it. That twist hit harder than anything else. She had been getting inside help from someone with real access, the HOA's attorney, apparently. The attorney had been leaking sensitive details to Karen under the table for years. In return, she was helping him quietly force out homeowners and scoop up properties under shell companies they created. They'd done it 3 times already. My house would have been number 4 if I hadn't come home early. Just as I tried to wrap my head around all of it, one of the techs shouted from the guest room. They had found a second hidden compartment, this one behind a panel under the floorboards. Inside, a stack of signed HOA resignation letters and one more flash drive. Labeled with the name of the HOA president, the detective plugged it in. The audio was fuzzy at first. Then a familiar voice came through. Was the president himself, talking casually with Karen and the attorney, discussing how removing non-compliant owners was cleaning up the neighborhood. They laughed, like it was nothing. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just a crime. It was an organized effort. They arrested Karen on the spot for trespassing, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Warrants were issued for the attorney and the HOA president the next morning. But here's the twist that still gives me chills. A week later, after everything blew open, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single key, and a note that read, "You are never supposed to come back." After getting that key in the mail, I didn't sleep right for days. The police ran forensics on it, but it didn't match any locks in my house or Karen's car. To this day, I don't know who sent it or what door it was meant for, but I do know this. I wasn't just the unlucky target of a nosy HOA board member. I was nearly another name on a growing list of homeowners who had been pushed out, manipulated, or scared into silence. In the weeks that followed, the investigation widened. The HOA president and the attorney were both taken into custody. Turns out, they'd been using HOA power as a front to seize homes, forge documentation, and quietly profit off vulnerable residents. Dozens of neighbors came forward once they heard what happened to me. Some had been too afraid to speak up before. Others had thought it was just their bad luck. But now they knew the truth wasn't them. It was Karen and her little operation hiding behind HOA rules. I worked with local officials to help reform the HOA system in our community. We voted in new leadership, established third-party oversight, and set up protections so this could never happen again. As for Karen, she's still facing charges, and from what I hear, more evidence keeps coming out. The whole experience changed the way I look at homeownership, privacy, and trust. I thought locking my doors and paying my dues was enough. But sometimes, the real threats aren't strangers. They're the people pretending to protect you. So if you live in an HOA, stay alert, ask questions, know your rights, 'cause you never Know who's watching or what's hiding just beneath the surface of a perfectly trimmed lawn.